with ancient people with stone tools or copper? Like, explain that away.
They'd probably try, mate, because it already doesn't make sense. Their explanation for the construction of the pyramids being wooden sledges and stone chisels or whatever they say, it already doesn't make sense. It's already so ridiculous that I wouldn't even be surprised if they tried to explain away these
it'll discredit them, because the problem is, if it does indicate that the pyramid is something other than a tomb,
I don't even see any evidence that the Great Pyramid at Giza, I mean, what's the evidence that was a tomb? I mean, I don't think they've ever found a body in there.
No.
It's just a chamber which they've called the King's Chamber.
Right.
I mean, I'm not an expert in ancient Egypt by any respect, but it's always baffled me that they're so determined that the pyramids are tombs just because some later pyramids have had, mummies and pharaohs and sarcophagi found inside them. But
that doesn't mean anything, and that doesn't mean that they built it. That also could mean that the pharaoh decided that it was his and wanted to be buried inside of it, and it had existed for thousands of years before they ever even got there.
And you find bodies in buildings today, and that doesn't mean the purpose of that building was to be a tomb.
Right.
It's just someone's buried there, so someone, as you say,
it's a weird assumption. It's a very weird assumption. And did you ever read any Christopher
Dunn, yeah.
Christopher Dunn's work.
I know a bit. I haven't read his book, but I know a bit about it. And it's interesting. I mean, he's like a serious guy, isn't he? He's like
an engineer.
Exactly, and he has quite serious theories that...
He thinks it's a power plant.
Yeah, which would be crazy, wouldn't it?
Especially if you add into that the Graham Hancock's ideas and some of these other people's ideas that perhaps some of these structures are far older.
Well, the kind of Orion correlation and the Sphinx...
Also, the fact that the deeper you go into the sand, the more sophisticated the building techniques are.
Yeah.
That gets weird. Like, larger stones. Like, what happened?
The whole of, ancient Egypt and the Sahara Desert in general just doesn't make sense to me, because when you look at the Sahara Desert and the fact that it was green for 9,000 years, and then it stopped being green at precisely the time that we're told ancient Egypt emerged, that doesn't make sense. That defies how civilization works. Why would a civilization only emerge after the climate got worse?
Right.
That doesn't make sense at all.
And so little research done in sub-Saharan Africa, where they've actually gone into the ground and done large-scale research of these immense areas.
Nothing. The Sahara Desert is vast and obviously covered in sand and extremely hot, extremely difficult to survey, politically unstable, and there's basically been no archaeological work done across the whole, and the Sahara Desert is massive. It's like the whole of North Africa right down to...
Right.
I mean, it's massive, and...
You could fit the United States in there.
You could fit anything in there, like a whole... preceding civilization for 9,000 years leading up to ancient Egypt. It's the perfect place. It's right by Mesopotamia. It's right by Egypt. And yet we have this blank spot for the 9,000 years before the development of civilization, which is kind of also the gap between... I mean, it's a little bit less than this, but the gap between Göbekli Tepe and the birth of civilization. We have this huge area which would have been perfect for civilization, full of rivers, lakes, grasslands, perfect climate, and it's just missing.
Also, abundant resources where they could establish a stable civilization because they had so much food and they weren't being attacked, so they could kind of set up shop and figure some things out.
Yeah.
Over a long period of time.
Yeah. So my theory is that things were happening in the Sahara Desert when it was green, in the Green Sahara, for those 9,000 years. And then, because it was really quick, that's what I don't think people realize, is that when the Sahara Desert turned from, green, lush paradise, whatever you want to call it, to a desert, it was like a few centuries. It's called rapid desertification, and it flipped, not overnight, obviously, but in a few centuries compared to 9,000 years is a rapid change. And for any kind of culture that was living there, you wouldn't have noticed it straight away, but in 50 years, you'd be like, fuck, it's getting a bit hot here. Do you know what I mean? Like, shit's going on. And then so I think maybe people migrated to the last stretch of green that was still available to them, which was the Nile River. And then the kind of survivors or the migratory populations developed around the Nile River, and using the kind of experience and knowledge that they had from their lives and the kind of history of their cultures in the Green Sahara period, that is what led to ancient Egypt. I mean, that's just a
Well, it's
theory,
also
but...
just an assumption that ancient Egypt didn't exist alongside that,
That's true,
or even previous to that, which is also possible, especially when you consider what Robert Schoch thinks about the erosion, the water erosion in the Temple of the Sphinx.
Yeah, the kind of explanation away of that also never made sense to me, that it's wind and sand, because when you see pictures of the Sphinx, even from when they kind of found it in Napoleonic times, it's buried in sand.
Right.
And there's records from the Egyptians themselves who, excavated it effectively because it was covered in sand. So if it quickly gets covered in sand, how could it be eroded by wind and sand if it doesn't take very long for it to kind of get filled up with sand? Then how does wind and sand erosion even count? I've never seen anyone kind of explain that away.
Well, it's the walls that are the most fascinating to me, because the deep fissures that clearly look like rainfall. It looks like something that water does over thousands of years.
Yeah.
And when you...
Those whales that were the Valley of the Whales. It's just about, I don't know how many miles south, but it's south of Cairo.
That's bonkers too.
Yeah.
That's crazy. They find
Hundreds of
whales. Hundreds of whales in the desert. That's so great. Look at that image. That's so nuts. That is so nuts.
Some of them had teeth and toes.
So crazy. So crazy. And then it makes you wonder, like, how did those bones survive? Like, why are they there? Like, how quickly did they die? How quickly did they get covered up by sediment that they could find them all these years later? Because that's the weird thing about fossils and bones in general, is that most of them you're never going to find because they get eaten, they deteriorate, they're gone. Like, it's very difficult to make a fossil. When you think about our, quote-unquote fossil record, it's really weird because it's hard to make a fossil.
Yeah.
So we're dealing with a very small amount of beings that get turned into a fossil. And that is what we're using as our understanding of, like, life.
Yeah.
It's weird.
It is weird.
Because it's so limited.
I'm not sure do you know when the Sahara was covered in water? I'm not even sure when that was. I mean, some people say that there's like a mass flood during the kind of Younger Dryas period, which I think is...
I think they're talking about millions of years ago for these bones.
Yeah.
How old are these whale bones supposed to be? But I think millions of years ago, it's assumed that it was completely underwater, right? So are we talking like Pangea times? Like, what are we talking about?
I don't know. But even not too long ago, like, kind of 12,000 years ago, whatever, they had these massive river systems, like the Tamanrasset River system.
Here it is.
40 million years old.
Yeah.
40 million years
But I don't know
old.
about the whales.
Oh my God.
Primitive whales.
Primitive whales documenting, how do you say that word? Cetacean? How do you say that word? Cetacean transition? Is that how you say
I
it?
don't know.
Cetacean transition to marine life, sauridians and reptiles, as well as shark teeth from the Genaham Formation 40 to 41 million years ago. The strata in, I don't say that either, Wad al-Hitan belongs to Middle Eocene epoch, and it contains extensive vertebrate fossils within a 200-kilometer area. Fossils are present in high numbers and often show excellent quality of preservation. The most conspicuous fossils are skeletons and bones of whales and sea cows.
What's a sea cow?
I don't know, man.
What's a manatee?
You ever see the precursor to whales, like where whales came from?
No, where did they come from?
It was an ancient animal that was like almost like a hooved wolf.
What, sea animal?
No,
you mean,
it was
so they
a
were
land animal. That's why they breathe air.
Oh, of course, they're mammals, aren't they?
Yeah.
That's weird.
It's super weird. It's super weird. It was some animal that supposedly lived on land and is real freaky looking, almost kind of like dog-like.
Yeah.
And that thing eventually
Became
said,
a whale.
I just like swimming.
I'm gonna go back
And
into
then
the
one
sea.
day it said, I'm never going back to the land. It's filled with assholes. I'm just going to live out here in the ocean where all you have to contend with is
This
sharks.
article calls it the god of death whale.
Wow, that's what it looks like. That's what it looked
That's pretty
like.
terrifying.
But there's some images of it on land, some depictions. Yeah, that's what it looked like. That freaky thing was what whales came from. That thing walked around the ground and then eventually said,
If it's 40 million years ago, is that what those skeletons are then? Maybe.
Interesting. Some of them maybe, right? Because they do know that thing. It was when whales walked in Egypt. Wow. I was watching, I don't remember whose podcast it was. I wish I could remember. But we were talking to some guy that found definitive evidence of dinosaurs in Egypt. So if you go back far enough, there were dinosaurs living in that part of the world as well. What's that one image you just saw right there with the mouth open? Yeah, that one. That's crazy looking. Prehistoric whale ancestor. Look at that thing. Whoa. That's crazy.
Here's the sea cows.
What?
So this image says a prehistoric sea cow was killed by a prehistoric croc.
Wow.
Then eaten by a tiger shark. I don't know.
Boy. Life is hard where there's no doors. That's the problem with the ocean. There's no doors. There's nowhere to hide.
Yeah,
So it's just constant chaos. It is just constant things eating things in this 3D space where they can go up and down and side to side. And
That's just nature, isn't it, man?
It
Everyone's
is.
just killing everything else. And
yes. This episode is brought to you by Uber Eats. Summer is here, and you can now get almost anything you need for your sunny days delivered with Uber Eats. What do I mean by almost? Well, you can't get a well-groomed lawn delivered, but you can get chicken parmesan delivered. A day in the sun? No. A bottle of rum? Yes. Uber Eats can definitely get you that for almost anything delivered with Uber Eats. Order now. For alcohol, you must be legal drinking age. Please enjoy responsibly. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
we made it.
But we figured out doors.
We did.
We figured out walls and doors, and that changed the game.
But when did we do that, Joe? That's the question.
That is the
Because
question.
a lot of people would claim to think, and the kind of consensus always is, that we didn't do that until 12,000 years ago. We didn't settle down and form permanent communities until the Neolithic Revolution. And I think that's one of the major paradigms, if you like, that we have regarding our past that simply doesn't make sense in light of new evidence. And
What is that evidence that they found of wood construction from far longer than they thought?
yeah, this is the Colombo structure. And this
Yes.
is something I talk about a lot in my videos because I think it's a crazy find and I don't understand why it's not kicking up more of a fuss. Like, if I'm the guy that has to kick up the fuss about it, then I'll be that guy because basically the idea has always been that humans were nomadic hunter-gatherers that moved with the seasons and lived in caves or just kind of walked around for all of our history until the Neolithic Revolution, the invention of agriculture 12,000 years ago. And no earlier than that did we ever settle down and live in permanent settlements. But the Colombo structure was something they found a few years ago in modern-day Zambia. And what it is these pieces of wood, and I'll get to the point about why this wood has survived in a minute, because obviously, wood surviving this long is crazy. But there you go. Yes, the Colombo structure is these pieces of wood that have been joined together deliberately, cut in notches and connected together, tapered and secured at right angles. And they think it was either a kind of raised walkway, like a kind of raised platform, or a house, a dwelling, a hut, some kind of structure. And why this is so paradigm shifting is because not only does this kind of scream that humans potentially lived in permanent settlement. So, sorry, I haven't even said this. This is 476,000 years old. So this predates Homo sapiens. So allegedly, as in, what do you mean allegedly? Oh,
Because we
exactly.
recently found out that they lived 300,000 years
I guess, it could have been us. But what they attribute it to is Homo heidelbergensis, who's our last common ancestor with Neanderthals. So they're kind of the human species that came before Homo sapiens. So I guess you're right. It could have been Homo sapiens, and we're just not sure how old we are. But it's
Look at that.
it's kind of attributed to Homo heidelbergensis. And the only reason this structure survived at all is because pretty soon after its construction, it must have fallen into a bog. And then that bog kind of got solidified over by the sun, and then it was preserved in waterlogged sediment, which protected it from decay for almost 500,000 years until it was discovered by us recently. And
How recent?
I think about 5 years ago, maybe. Was it 2019 or something? I'm not 100% sure. But it's crazy. It
So
lasted
another
so long.
monkey wrench.
Yeah, I would say it's a massive monkey wrench, because not only does it kind of really dispute this idea that we didn't settle down until 12,000 years ago with the Neolithic Revolution, because it's a structure. And it's just because it's so unlikely, it's so unbelievable that this would have survived. But that kind of suggests that it's not the only one.
Right.
There could have been loads of these, like
Right.
structures everywhere. And
But as you said, Manhattan
yeah,
wouldn't exist in 100,000 years. So this is 476,000 years.
yeah, it's ridiculous.
And it's just wood, which is less durable
Yeah.
than all the other things that we were talking about.
Yeah, and obviously people may be saying, well, look, clearly things survive, but this is an extreme edge case scenario where it's it's like so unbelievably unlikely that this wooden structure would kind of sink into a bog, and then that bog be, solidified over, and then it would stay in that preserved. Like
then that they would find it.
And then they would find it, exactly, because what
you
are the
have to go
chances?
476,000 years into the sediment.
Yeah, exactly. Because we don't dig that far and look for anything sophisticated, because we think, nothing happened back then. And then you find this, and it really suggests that humans were living in much more complex societies. And the fact that they had the cognitive capacity to plan, structurally engineer, and build a structure completely flies in the face of what we've always thought about ancient humans. Because we've always had this idea that there's been this very popular idea in kind of mainstream historical thought that humans only got smart around 50 to 60,000 years ago. And that's just Homo sapiens. We've always thought that other human species never got smart, never achieved what we call behavioral modernity. And this has always been the kind of idea that we went through this cognitive revolution around 50 to 60,000 years ago. And the most obvious proponent of how entrenched this is in kind of academic thought is, have you ever read the book Sapiens?
Yes.
Yeah, by Yuval Noah Harari. It's an extremely popular book. It sold something like 60 million copies worldwide. By far the most popular book about prehistory and, the story of Homo sapiens ever written. And Sapiens didn't kind of do anything new. It didn't, I think Harari himself would admit this. It kind of just collected the consensus of academia and presented it in a nice, digestible way to the kind of layman audience. But he took this idea that's always been present in academia regarding human intelligence, which is that while we've been around for quite a long time, we didn't achieve behavioral modernity until 50 to 60,000 years ago. And that's when we started apparently displaying complex cognitive traits like abstract thinking and planning and burying our dead. And art, yeah, exactly, and complex language and things like that. But this just completely flies in the face of that, because if we had the capability to plan, construct, and engineer a structure 476,000 years ago, that means, mainstream anthropology was off by over 400,000 years regarding the advent of intelligence and the advent of permanent living. And that's quite the error. 400,000 years, exactly. So that kind of suggests they could be off by similar margins about other developmental claims, because I don't know, it's a big error.
Well, it's also, when you think about the history of the Earth, there are times that we know that there's great bottlenecks that occurred because of some sort of a massive natural catastrophe, like the Toba volcano.
Yeah.
Right, the Toba volcano, which was 70,000 years ago? Is that what it was?
Just about that, yeah.
Brought people down to a few thousand survivors on Earth.
Yeah, and there's loads of these bottlenecks.
Yeah.
And you look at our kind of genetic history, and that suggests that something happened.
Right. Well, you're thinking about what evidence there is, and then you think about, there's no one left except a few thousand people 70,000 years ago. So it's possible that there's been this rise of some sort of a civilization and then massive catastrophe and a rebuilding. Just like if we're talking about the Younger Dryas, which is in this time period we're talking about, when you're dealing with 476,000 years ago, fairly recent, right?
Very recent.
Right.
Yeah.
And think about the 6,000 years it took for civilization to reemerge from that. Now you think of Toba, and you knock down the entire population of the planet to, what did they think it was? See if you can find out what the number was. I think it was very low. I think it was below 3,000 people on Earth.
Yeah.
On Earth.
Yeah, just from one natural disaster.
People. One massive super volcano, which is, by the way, just like Yellowstone.
Yeah. There's lots. It could all happen again.
That motherfucker is bubbling, too. Here it is. Potentially, almost all of humanity, leaving around 3,000 to 10,000 humans left on the planet.
That's crazy.
Wow.
And supervolcano isn't the only thing. There's so many others.
What time period is this, Jamie? 74,000 years ago.
So that's quite recent.
Yeah.
In terms of our story.
Well, in terms of your theory that I thought was one of the most interesting ones that you brought up, that in your videos, you were talking about how anatomical humans, just based on what we've agreed to, based on what we found 300,000 years, like, what are the possibilities that there have been civilizations that emerged and were destroyed, and then there's no evidence of them?
Yeah, because aside from the preservation problem, which we kind of already talked about, when you get up to these massive timescales, very little is going to survive, especially when you think about what early humans were likely building with.
Yes.
Like, it's probably the things they could find in their environment, like
Right.
wood, hide, plant remains.
You'd have
reed.
nothing left.
Nothing.
Just look at what we know about the Amazon now.
Yeah.
Because of LiDAR and because of, what is his name? Percy Fawcett. Because these people that made these journeys down there looking for these complex civilizations that at one point in time, now we know did exist there.
Yeah.
And just 100 years later, they called those people liars because they went back to the same place and there was nothing left.
Yeah. And so that's always been, thought of as myth or pseudoscience, that it's kind of that most popular idea of lost civilizations was civilizations of the Amazon, and it was always dismissed. But
Well, here's what's really crazy. Have you seen Detroit? Have you seen the evidence
Yeah.
of Detroit
Or-
where trees are going through houses?
And that's like 50 years, less.
Yes,
Or if you look
less.
at Chernobyl, the kind of exclusion zone where no one lives, it's already like trees everywhere, and like nature is already taking root after less than half a century.
Yeah, bizarre.
And then 100,000 years. Like,
Right.
seriously, what's going to be left?
Very, very little. And then if you go 200,000 years, I mean, if anatomically modern humans, we've discovered them at 300,000 years, what if somebody digs one up that's 2 million years old? Then what do you do? then you got to go, oh boy. And
this
then there's also this thought that Neanderthals were stupid. They're kind of abandoning that now too. They're thinking they had language, they had tools, they had society.
They definitely did. There's so much evidence, and this kind of puts into the cognitive revolution argument, which is, that we were the only smart species. Like, our name that we gave ourselves, Homo sapiens, literally means smart man. It's always been the idea that we're the smartest humans, and that's why we won. And to be fair, we did win. Or
We did win.
win, whatever you want to
We
call
might
it.
just be the most evil.
Yeah, we might be the most evil, or we just might be the luckiest ones,
Well, we're the weakest, so we probably had to be evil.
It's true.
We had to figure out weapons that would be able to defeat the Neanderthals, who had, by the way, larger brain capacities.
I think
than
they were
Homo
just as
sapiens.
intelligent as us, to be
That's
honest.
nuts.
Well, I mean, that's a claim that probably some people would dispute, but I think there's lots of evidence that they were very smart. And
Well, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And if you're physically weaker than these other things that are as intelligent as you and far stronger,
yeah.
like you gotta get devious. You gotta figure some stuff out.
But like, did we even? I mean, maybe they got wiped out by something like disease, or did they even get wiped out? Because if you even look at the DNA of non-African humans, it's something like 20% in some populations is Neanderthal. So
Yes.
they're kind of still here.
Well, they just sort of interbred.
Yeah.
Which is also weird because most species can't breed with other species.
Yeah.
Just,
But we're very closely related to Neanderthals.
Yeah, it's weird. The whole history of humans is weird, and for academics to deny this possibility to me seems so short-sighted
I know. It will
and
change.
silly.
I think we're on the brink of quite a